Are we ready? Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Fareed Khan. I'm the founder of Canadians United Against Hate. And today I'm here to mark the United Nations Day of Commemoration of Victims of Genocide, which was yesterday, and International Human Rights Day, which is today. In the spirit of reconciliation with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, I'd like to begin remarks by acknowledging that I'm here today on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people in the National Capital Region. Joining me today are Professor Nadia Abu-Zahra, a professor at the University of Ottawa and a researcher with the university's Human Rights Center. Rabbi David Mivasair, who's a human rights activist and founding member of Independent Jewish Voices, who's joining us virtually. Dr. Yipeng Ge, an Ottawa physician who has traveled to Gaza on a medical mission in the last year, and Yavar Hameed, an Ottawa-based human rights lawyer. As we look around the world today, the status of human rights is on very shaky ground, and in some cases non-existent, like in the case of Palestinians facing genocide by Israel. Some academics have said that we are now living in a post-human rights era, and if that's the case, then Palestinians, Uyghurs in China, Rohingya in Myanmar, and other persecuted minorities around the world face a very dire future. One of the most egregious cases of human rights violations has been the brutal and unceasing atrocities Israel's fascist regime has committed in Gaza over the last year. Israel's crimes have been labeled genocide by the UN Special Rapporteur on to the Palestinian territories, by Amnesty International, the International Court of Justice, hundreds of Jewish and Israeli Holocaust and genocide scholars, as well as by South Africa, Ireland, Belgium, Spain, Egypt, and a host of other governments and respected international institutions. And yet the Canadian government refuses to acknowledge that Israel is committing genocide. It continues to sell Canadian-made weapons to a racist genocidal regime that has killed more than 52,000 Palestinians and over 17,000 children, according to figures provided by the Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor. And some of its officials, the Canadian government's officials like Deborah Lyons, the special representative to combat anti-Semitism, and MP Anthony Housefather, the special advisor to the Prime Minister on anti-Semitism, slander, denigrate, and dehumanize Palestinians and their supporters for condemning Israeli crimes with false and unfounded accusations of anti-Semitism. The actions of Canada and its allies have demonstrated that where Palestinians are concerned, human rights don't exist, and that it's okay if Israel exterminates them as a people, a culture, and a society. This was the approach taken by the West in the 1930s towards Jews when the Nazis began sending them off to concentration camps, and today we are seeing that history repeated with Palestinians. Canada's failure to keep these persecuted people, to help these persecuted people, demonstrates the highest order of state-sanctioned racism. And the best example of this is how Canada has responded to their suffering and pain compared to how it opened the doors to Ukrainians when Russia invaded that country. For Ukrainians, restrictions to settle in Canada were lifted, fees waived, and red tape eliminated, allowing almost 300,000 refugees and temporary residents to settle here. And Canada has gone to the wall to support Ukraine in its war against Russia, or war with Russia, with well over $10 billion in economic and humanitarian and military aid. For Palestinians facing genocide, Canada set up a program only for those who have family here in Canada, and made the rules so onerous that only 300 Palestinians have been accepted into Canada as of October 2024, and the total number has been limited to only 5,000 people. If that isn't a blatant violation of human rights and an act of state racism, I don't know what is. But while Canada's treatment of Palestinians is the biggest case of violating human rights, there's also the situation of the rights of Canadian residents under assault here at home. The list of recent rights violations on Canadian soil include Alberta, where the government recently passed legislation that violates the rights of people who are transgender and LGBTQ. This is a community facing persecution across the country, particularly in provinces that are governed by the Conservatives. In Ontario, there are dozens of mayors calling for the Premier to use the Constitution's notwithstanding clause to give them authority to violate the rights of the homeless by removing their encampments after a recent court ruling prevented them from doing so. In addition, we have a clear violation of charter rights in the Ontario legislature, where the Speaker has banned the wearing of the keffiyeh, the black and white Palestinian scarf that is a symbol of their culture. In addition, in Quebec, the Bill 21 secularism law has violated the rights of religious minorities there for more than 5 years. Quebec's premier is now musing about violating religious rights, again by banning prayer in public spaces. And across Canada, anti-genocide protesters have had their right to freedom of expression and right to protest violated by municipal and provincial governments, police, and university CEOs who have tried to silence and suppress their voices in support of Palestinians and have intimidated and persecuted them when they have resisted. In light of all this, Canadians United Against Hate is issuing the following calls to action. That Canada implement a full arms embargo against Israel and implement Magnitsky Act sanctions against Israel's top political and military leaders for committing genocidal crimes. That Canada list the Israeli occupation forces as a terrorist entity and bring charges against Israel's military leaders at the ICC for perpetrating crimes against humanity and genocide. That any Canadian who has traveled to Israel to join the Israeli occupation forces be arrested upon their return for violating Canadian and international law and for complicity in crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. That Deborah Lyons, the Special Representative to Combat Anti-Semitism, and MP Anthony Housefather, the PM Special Advisor on Anti-Semitism, be fired for promoting anti-Palestinian racism narratives and for standing in solidarity and supporting Israel as it committed crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And domestically, we call on the Canadian government to use its power of disallowance under the Constitution to overturn Quebec's Bill 21, Alberta's recent anti-trans legislation, and any other laws passed by provincial governments that use the notwithstanding clause to legalize violations of the charter rights of Canadians. We're living in a very dangerous moment in time, and if we fail to protect Palestinian rights today as they suffer genocide, the result will be a country and a world governed by the whims of capricious politicians. A world where prejudice, hate, racism, barbarity, and brutality will rule the day, and where Canada, frankly, will more closely resemble apartheid Israel. As Jewish political theorist and philosopher Hannah Arendt once said, the death of human empathy is the earliest and most telling sign of a culture about to fall into barbarism. And given the lack of empathy shown by most of our political, corporate, and academic leaders towards Palestinians as they face genocide, we are rushing headfirst towards the gates of a barbaric society. And all I have to say to that is God help us if that comes to pass. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Fareed. So I want to share a message to fellow Canadians, those of us who live in a country which functions through democratic processes, are privileged to be able to participate in shaping the decisions that our country makes. And we've heard right now from Fareed Khan so much about how Canada is directly participating in violations of human rights and even in a genocide. The message that I want to bring today is from a great teacher of mine who I never met, but I learned from his teachings, from his actions in the world, from what he said, and he's Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was born into actually a dynasty, a legacy, a long line of Hasidic Jewish teachers and leaders who were all annihilated by the Nazi genocide against the Jews. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel himself was able to escape, and he taught for the rest of his life in the United States. One of the teachings that he passed down that I think we all need to pay attention to today is that when we're living in a democracy that is complicit and participating in crimes against humanity, violations of human rights, and genocide, we need to know, as he said, that in a democracy, not all are guilty, but all are responsible. We are responsible for what our government is doing because we have the power to shape those outcomes. And I just want to encourage everyone listening to do all we can to be sure that Canada ends up on the right side of history at this time. Thank you. Invite the next speaker.
Mid-December in snowy Ottawa is considered the prelude to the holiday season. The atmosphere reminds people everywhere that candles are lit in the Holy Land and people dream of warmth, safety, and peace on earth. But far from Ottawa, in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Gaza, Nazareth, Bethany, the Jordan Valley, the Golan Heights, and many other hills, valleys, plains, and coasts, are hundreds of thousands of people starving, living without water, or heat, or safety, or their loved ones. Thousands of children have been purposefully orphaned. Tens of thousands of children have been killed. Hundreds of thousands of children have been wounded. Instead of sleeping peacefully, the children of Palestine, and specifically the hundreds of thousands of children in the Gaza Strip, are freezing in tents, with no warm water, no clean water, no schools, and no safety. The Israeli military is invading the Gaza Strip to take the land, to take the wealth of offshore resources, to take everything that these children have. The Israeli military has destroyed every university, attacked every hospital, attacked every school, bombed the tents, and ultimately destroyed every shred of life that these children knew. If Israel was under attack for one day, it has certainly not been under attack for over a year, as it has carried out a genocide that we witness from here in Ottawa, almost silently. I am a professor at the University of Ottawa. Our students and graduates have lost hundreds of family members, all killed by an Israeli military that is committing a genocide. The case of genocide is in front of the International Court of Justice. As the court awaits proceedings, it has already said that genocide is plausible, and the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defense Minister. Canada has still not recognized that Israel is committing genocide. Canada is still complicit by selling arms and military support directly and indirectly to Israel. Israeli soldiers come and go from Canada freely. Soldiers who have killed people, soldiers who have killed children. When war criminals come to Canada from other places, Canada has procedures in place. We must put procedures in place for Israeli soldiers. This holiday season, we have one basic minimum standard: stop Israel from killing more people. No more bombing, poisoning, burning, starving, torturing, shooting, pushing off buildings, burying alive. No more killing from Israel. That's the ask, Canada. Please step up. Palestinians are not safe. Lebanese are not safe. Syrians are not safe. We don't know who is next. Canada must do everything in its power. It is already too late. Everything now matters.
Good morning. My name is Yavar Hameed. I'm a human rights lawyer. I wish to address two issues that echo the comments of my esteemed panelists. First, the need for an immediate, unequivocal, and meaningful arms embargo against Israel. Secondly, the double standard in Canada's immigration policy when it comes to non-white and European immigrants, including Palestinians. On the first issue, in a recent publication, at least a recent public statement rather, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, "We stand up for international law and we will abide by all the regulations and rulings of the international courts. This is just who we are as Canadians." But vague platitudes are not enough and don't matter unless they coincide with action. Article 1 of the Genocide Convention establishes a legal duty for Canada to prevent and punish genocide. As a party to the Genocide Convention, Canada has a clear responsibility to take all reasonable actions to fulfill its duty to prevent genocide. Despite Canada being aware of the ICC arrest warrant against Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for possible war crimes, Canada continues to permit Canadian companies to export millions of dollars of arms to Israel. However, Canada is obliged to abide by Article 7 of the Arms Trade Treaty, whereby it must assess whether there is an overriding risk of any negative consequence for its export of arms. If there is such a risk, including the risk that the arms will be used to commit violations of international humanitarian law and war crimes, then Canada is legally prohibited from authorizing the export. In contravention, however, to its legal obligations, Canada has failed to terminate the export of parts for military equipment to the U.S., where their ultimate destination may be Israel. This includes contributions to the U.S. military contractor Lockheed Martin, which manufactures F-35 combat jets that have been deployed to drop 2,000-pound bombs on residential neighborhoods in Gaza. On December 15, 2023, Canadian government announced that it would be purchasing $32.2 million in U.S. Spike missiles manufactured by Israeli company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, thereby supporting one of the largest forces behind Israel's military-industrial complex. We need more than just platitudes and more than just a temporary cessation of suspension of arms transfers. We need a complete arms embargo on Canada's direct and indirect military support to Israel. This is a requirement under international law that Canada is obliged to follow. On the second issue, the two tiers of Canadian immigration policies, Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms provides that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination. Now, this includes protection from discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, and religion. However, Canada's immigration policies when it comes to Arab and Muslim countries is not on par with its proclivity towards European immigration. In litigation that my firm has filed against Immigration and Refugee and Citizenship Canada, in July of this year, the federal court ordered the disclosure of certain documents relating to the government rationale for what was known as the Canada-Ukraine Authorization for Emergency Travel, or QET. This includes a previously confidential government memo which states the following, and I think this bears note. The design of the QET is exceptional in nature. It underscores Canada's unique relationship with Ukraine, the extensive diaspora and family links, as well as the unique nature of the conflict as a significant land invasion adjacent to EU countries with generous immigration measures. However, it risks setting a significant precedent, one which may result in future pressures on the government to take similar action for other emergencies. I would ask, what are those other emergencies? Certainly, the famine, bombardment, forced dislocation, and what now Amnesty International has described as genocide in Gaza should qualify. However, in stark contrast to QET, the IRCC's Gaza Special Measures Program imposes several obstacles that make both application and the processing times for sponsorship application burdensome and inefficient, while Palestinian Canadians are left traumatized by the fact that their loved ones are dying and are at constant risk of death every day. Shockingly, the Gaza Special Measures Program includes a requirement that applicants residing in Gaza must obtain security clearance from Israel in order to qualify under the program. No similar provision was placed on Ukrainian applicants under the QET. Canada must change its discriminatory immigration policies. The Gaza Special Measures Program must be amended in conformity with human rights expectations, including Section 15 of the Canadian Charters of Rights and Freedoms, to allow an immediate and meaningful pathway for family unification for Palestinian Canadians.
As a member of Ottawa Healthcare Professionals for Palestine, I'll be sharing a statement that we put out yesterday. On the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of Genocide, we, the healthcare professionals of Ottawa, stand united in solemn reflection and unwavering solidarity with the victims of genocide across the globe. We honor their memory. We recommit ourselves to the fight for justice, dignity, and accountability. From the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, we acknowledge that Canada, as a settler colonial state, is built on stolen lands and broken treaties with Indigenous peoples, the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. The ongoing genocide of Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island is inextricably linked to the struggles of oppressed peoples worldwide. Solidarity begins with recognizing the lands we occupy and extends to supporting all who resist colonialism, systemic violence, and displacement from Turtle Island to Palestine to Sudan, Congo, and beyond. For months, we have been sounding the alarm. What is happening in Gaza is genocide. The world now knows this truth, confirmed by Amnesty International, but we, the healthcare workers, who have borne witness to these atrocities have known it all along. The deliberate destruction of healthcare infrastructure, the targeting of medical workers, and the mass slaughter of civilians have not been mistakes or collateral damage. They are part of a calculated strategy of extermination. Since October 7, 2023, over 1,000 healthcare workers have been killed, and more than 580 attacks have been carried out on hospitals and clinics. These numbers are not mere statistics. They represent lives destroyed, families shattered, and communities erased. We are not just bystanders to this destruction. Some of us have been on the ground in Gaza, where we have seen firsthand the horrors unfolding. Hospitals reduced to rubble, doctors and nurses killed while trying to save lives, and families obliterated in an instant. We have returned from Gaza to share these testimonies with the world, to call for urgent action to end this genocide. We will not be silenced, and we will not be complicit. The silence from our governments, our healthcare institutions, and the international community is not neutrality, it is complicity. Our colleagues in Gaza are dying while the world looks away, and the failure to act is a moral betrayal of the highest order. Our colleagues who have fled Gaza to seek refuge in Ottawa bear not just the physical and emotional scars of this genocide. They are survivors who remind us that this is not just a humanitarian crisis. It is a crime against humanity, and it demands accountability. As healthcare professionals, our commitment is clear: to save lives, to alleviate suffering, and to uphold the dignity of all people, regardless of where they live, who they are, or what they believe. This commitment to humanity means we cannot and will not remain silent while Israel's war crimes continue with international complicity. Silence in the face of genocide is complicity. There is no neutral ground. On this solemn day, we reflect not only on the lives lost in Gaza, but also on our own responsibility in this moment. We must ask ourselves, what will we do? What side of history will we be on? Will we act to stop these atrocities, or will we be remembered for our silence? We join healthcare workers worldwide in demanding an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and the West Bank, a comprehensive arms embargo on Israel and all governments enabling genocide, the establishment of medical evacuation corridors to provide life-saving care to civilians, unhindered humanitarian access to Gaza and other conflict zones, international recognition of these crimes as genocide and war crimes, and accountability for those responsible. Our commitment to humanity compels us to act now. We will not allow this genocide to continue unchallenged. We will not be silent. In solidarity, strength, and unrelenting hope. Signed, Ottawa Healthcare Professionals for Palestine.
Thank you. Are there any speakers?
This concludes the press conference. Thank you. Merci. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence de presse.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you all for coming down. So appreciate it.